Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this live stream. Tonight, we have a pleasure and honor to have a very good guy from the 816 and many other productions, mostly DOS and Amiga games. And tonight, we are going to talk with Tony Warriner. So, tonight, all the stream in English. So, Tony, thank you very much for joining Juanjo channel, and of course, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, we have many people on the chat, so feel free to give us whatever you want to know if I didn't ask Tony. Tony, recently we have a Chema for the Retromaniac, a very good interview about you when you start on the CPC and many other things. But you told him that you start with the Lynx computer. Lynx computer, it's a computer I never heard before. So why you choose that one in the era in that time?
It's a good question. I mean, a few of my friends bought ZX81s, and I was I missed. Everyone got them for Christmas one year, like 1981, and I didn't get one. And I thought, and then afterwards, I thought I should have got one of these machines. And I was playing on ZX81s at my friends' houses and stuff, and I started saving up for one, and then. Fairly quickly the Spectrum arrived. So then I sort of kept on saving for a Spectrum, and then I got an interest in the idea that I was going to be programming it, and just from borrowing other computers and computers at school and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I kept on saving, and then I saw that I kind of thought the Spectrum was maybe a little bit difficult with its keyboard and things like that. So I started looking at other computers because I bought all the magazines every month, and I was looking at all of the different machines. I was looking at Dragon 32 as well, and Color Genie, and there was MSX were coming, and there was the Commodore 64. There was lots of machines, and I decided I liked the idea of the Z80 chip, so that kind of cut the Commodore 64 to one side. And I just liked the look of this new machine that was coming called the Computers Lynx, and it was it had a nice keyboard, and it was supposedly going to be quite good for learning to program assembly on, because it had like a built-in machine code monitor, so you could type hex into it quite easily. That's what some reviews I read said. So I kind of thought, this is a machine for me. I'll have one of those, and I never really figured out that, or had any idea that maybe it wasn't a good idea, because within a year they would stop making them, and it would be a dead machine. But it actually proved to be a good decision in some ways, because it was good to program on. It was really great for typing in opcodes and testing machine codes. So, I never actually released a game on it, because it was gone before I wrote anything good enough. The machine was dead, But I learnt on it, so I did. In the end, I didn't regret it. Maybe I'd have been just as well off if I'd gone the Spectrum route. I probably should have bought Spectrum. Mm-hmm. Probably I should, or a Commodore 64. Commodore 64 would have been good, but then I'd have been the other side. I'd have been 652 program.
So you told my friend Chema that for the beginning it's much better to start learning assembly, machine code, or whatever, or the Z80 on very limited computers. So that one Lynx helps you in order to make games or programming, trying to approve all resources from the machine as well, in order to reach the maximum of the machine before jump to the CPC.
Yeah, I mean, it was. As a big, everyone learned BASIC. I learned BASIC, and but you quickly learn you can't do much with it. And we were always buying the latest games. The games would come out, and you'd see the latest Gargoyle game, or the latest Ultimate Play the Game, or something like that, or Bug Bites or Software Projects. These games every month you'd buy Crash Magazine, and they'd be just like games that were better than last month's games. That people were progressing so quickly, it was always a case of playing catch up. But once you saw once you saw a game doing something clever, like slightly smoother sprites or slightly better scrolling, you could kind of go into machine code and kind of just be able to do it. You could be able to match what anyone else had done. But once you'd seen it was possible, you could do it. And the only way to do that was to be in assembly code and learning all the tricks. And there was always new tricks. People were always learning. But somehow although there was no internet then, somehow people managed to communicate how they were doing things, So you'd kind of get an idea of how people were programming these games, and then you could try it yourself. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, you had to get really, really deep into the assembly and just learn all the tricks. It was all about tricks. It was all about what you can do it was all about can you render a sprite slightly quicker? Can you save a T state here, a T state there? I mean, that was the Z80. That was a sort of Spectrum world where there wasn't much hardware to help you. I mean, the Commodore 64 guys were doing the same, but they also had all the tricks on the chips, the sprite chips and the multiplexing and all those things. So they had more to work with than we did on the sort of Sinclair side of things.
That kind of tricks, as you say, are coming from the try and failure, or do you have any books, any library, or any way to improve yourself as a coder, or maybe talking with the others, or maybe the magazines on the era that you can learn more than you know?
It was a little bit of all those things, I mean, now I can't quite imagine how we did it, because you almost can't imagine a world without the internet, to be honest. But there was no internet, so I mean, some of the magazines kind of talked about these things in detail. There was little programming newsletters. I used to get a Links newsletter, which had lots of tips for coding, and eventually, when I went to work for Arctic Computing, there were other programmers there, and they knew things I didn't know, and I knew things they didn't know. So, and then we'd go off. We once went to a duplicators. We got sent to a duplication plant to take a game to be. They would the duplicator would put protection on it, and then they would do a master tape, and we used to take the tapes down and do that. So we'd get talking to the guys, and like these guys at the duplicators, they would see all programmers. Like all programmers would bring the games in to be duplicated to this factory. It's called Ablex, somewhere in the Midlands in the UK. So these guys working at Ablex, they would talk to all games programmers from different companies, and they would learn all the tricks that those guys were doing, and then they would kind of tell everybody else. So it was a great way to learn things. And that's how it was done, really, word of mouth. More than anything, word of mouth, I think.
So you used to try, to take a look to the others' code, how the others make their games, in order to look at this. This is very good. I didn't discover this trick. Maybe I have to get the source code in order to learn many more.
A little bit of that, yeah. I can't remember taking apart too many games. I mean, we used to try and take off the protection systems on some games. You remember Jet Set Willy?
Uh-huh.
It had like a printed color code thing.
Yeah.
That you had to type. And I mean, I bought a copy of the game, but I really disliked having to do the copy protection every time. So I decided to hack it out. So I spent ages. That was like one of the hardest ones. I got quite good at hacking out protection systems. And you learn a lot about programming from doing that kind of thing. But I never kind of got into the heart of the engines and saw how they were doing the rendering, so that kind of thing. We never really did that. It was just, it's a thing in itself. We were too busy making our own games to spend like weeks and weeks and weeks disassembling everybody else's.
How many time I spent on the Amstrad CPC to make commercial games, Tony? Maybe 2, 4, 6 months. Or maybe the company make you a hurry in order to end them on time?
They weren't. I mean, in those days, the games were quite simple. So we used to think you could write a game in 2-3 months. Was the general what you tried to do, and I think there was a kind of a teenage brain kind of thing. You'd just be able to concentrate. I mean, I could concentrate much longer, much more deeply then than I can now, for example. So I was probably more productive in some ways as as a teenager or a 20-year-old, you know.
Yeah.
And we used to write lots of code in quite a short amount of time. I don't know how we did it really. I can't quite do it the same way now, but you'd go very, very deeply into it and write a lot of code quite quick. So I mean, yeah, and there were the games themselves. I mean, when I had a job, they were trying to make us do them in 3 months, 4 months, that kind of thing. When I worked at Cascade Games, I mean, 3 to 6 months, that kind of thing for a project. But to learn the machine itself, the CPC, I think it was quite quick. Before, I bought that machine eventually after the links disappeared. And I think I got into the coding like really quick. It was, you buy the firmware manual thing and it's not that difficult, you know. Mm-hmm. It's it was. In fact, it was easier in some ways than the links I was used to. So I found the CPC very easy. Yeah.
So you realize that the 8-bit era ends about maybe 1990. But when you have clear that you have to change the 8 for the 16 platform as well, in order to let them go the Amstrad, the Spectrum, and many things, and go through the OS and Amiga and Atari ST, the 16-bit machines.
Yeah, no, that was quite a scary transition, really. I mean, I went to the Atari ST first, and that was more like an 8-bit machine that I was used to, because really there wasn't that much hardware to help you. You had memory, you had a CPU, and you had screen memory, and you were kind of doing everything in software. So I was more of an Atari guy. I found that quite easy, and the chip was quite easy to learn. You know, I think the 68000 is probably the nicest instruction set of any CPU that I've worked on. So I found Atari ST not too bad to get into at all. And we had a PDS system. As soon as I started on ST, I had a PDS system, so it was just like programming a Spectrum, but it was like a big Spectrum. You know,
yeah,
it was like the Spectrum of your dreams. It was like loads of memory and speed, and I don't remember it being too difficult. I think the Amiga was harder again, because like the Commodore 64, because you had all these chips, and you had bit planes and blitters and hardware sprites and stuff, and that kind of thing was more difficult to get your head around. I remember, working with people who were doing Amiga things, and they spent a lot of time looking in manuals, trying to
there
work
is
it out.
Too much difference between the Atari ST and the Amiga doing the custom chips. Do you make your Amiga games using the custom chips, or you port exactly from the Atari ST versions?
That's a good question. I think you see, I did Lure the Temptress, and I led the programming. I was lead programmer on Lure, and I did Atari ST. Atari ST was my machine. My friend Dave was porting my code in sort of real time to the PC. Mm-hmm. So he was writing 8086 code, or 8080 code, whatever it was, Intel code. So he had his own problems. He had problems with things like DOS extenders, which is a real nightmare. If you know what a DOS extender is, it's like a nightmare from hell. But it kind of it solved some problems. It was like I think like Doom was the first PC game to use a DOS extender, and it gave you more memory. Basically, It gave you. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that was the problem on the PC. Atari was just kind of nice, because it was a nice flat machine with just a CPU, and we actually hired another guy in to help us with the Amiga version. So I think he kind of looked at my code, and where I would on the Atari where I would draw when I would make a call somewhere to subroutine that was going to render the sprite on the screen or something. He would do the Amiga version of that for me, and probably he was using the Blitter chip, I would think. Yeah. But because why not? And the machine had that facility. So, and I think there's a bit more memory to chuck around on the Amiga, because the graphics were slightly better. So, the Atari had less colors, so there's probably less memory being moved around. So it made sense to use the hardware on the Amiga. So I think we did use probably the Blitter.
Mm-hmm. When you let the 8 bits go instead of the 16-bit, it just was the commercial decision, or maybe the new capabilities of the new computers, extra memory, powerful CPUs, and kind of games like graphic adventures. You know that now it's the time, and that's the kind of games I want to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a sense that it was getting harder and harder to innovate on the 8 bits, and they were kind of limited a little bit. But our hand was our hand was forced in a way. It wasn't really our kind of decision to make, because you looked at the market, and America was ahead, you see, because they were doing, America had the PC as a more mature games market than we had in Europe. So we were looking at, Charles Cecil was at Activision, and who I'd worked with at Arctic on the 8-bits, and he was seeing all the Sierra games on the PC, and they were much bigger, more sophisticated games than we were seeing on the 8-bits. I mean, we played adventure games like the Level 9 games and stuff, and I mean, they were incredibly clever what they were doing to make those games on the 8-bits, but they were smaller in scope than what Sierra was doing graphically on Legend 2 Larry and King's Quest and all those sorts of things. So to us it was like, these are the games we're going to have to write, and they're going to be bigger and they're going to be more sophisticated, and you just had no choice to go that way. I mean, the market, as you say, it was a commercial thing. The market moved very quickly from 8-bit to 16-bit, very quickly. It was like a couple of years, and people doing Spectrum games were just left behind, and the shops stopped stocking them, and the magazines closed, and what could you do? It died very quickly. Yeah. Or at least the perception was it died very quickly. So you just had to keep moving and go 16-bit and then go PC.
When you make that movement to go through the 16 bits, what's more difficult to create a Revolution Software as your own company and a founder, or do you try or take a look to join existing one as a coder as well, or do you prefer to found your own company as well?
I think it's always more fun to form your own company. For me, the worst thing in life is being told what to do. So, if you're working for someone else and you're making their games, and it's usually, the games industry is not. It's still chaotic, and companies are generally not very well organized. So, if you're going to work for a crazy game development environment, then it may as well be your own crazy game development environment, rather than someone else's. So
you prefer to take your own control of everything that's happening around you, no?
Well, supposedly you're in control of it. It's actually always out of control, but at least in a way that you understand slightly more. Our games were always very chaotic. And at Revolution, certainly the early days, Lure of Temptress and Steel Sky, it was crazy. Crazy stuff was going on. It was out of control most of the time, but that was part of the fun, I suppose, and that's where the creativity came from as well. So, at the time it was quite stressful, but looking back, I'm kind of thinking that was a great way to make games. You
have friends in that crazy world that told you, "Hey, mate, this company, it's a mess," something like that.
Yeah, that's games dev. It's still a mess. Games developers come and go. Because it's difficult, and people argue and they make mistakes, and games are just difficult to make. So the bigger they are, and the more people involved, the harder it is. The more money involved, the harder it is. The longer the development cycle, the harder it is. So it's just no one's found a way to make it reliable. There's not much consistency in video game development. Even now, the publishers come and go, the developers come and go. They get closed down. They reform smaller companies. Some of those ones survive, grow bigger, and then when they grow big, they hit the same problems again, and the cycle goes round and round. I mean, you look at the car industry, you say the car industry's on a 100-year cycle, games industry's on like a 10-year cycle, you know.
So one of your first games for the 16B stage was one celebrated by everyone, Buenas Steel Sky. What reference about the graphic adventures do you have before created or programming code the Buenas Steel Sky from the era, maybe the LucasArts, Sierra? Which was your favorite adventures before to create your own secret agent Buenas Steel Sky?
Well, my favorite adventure games still are the level 9 games. You know, Colossal Adventure. I mean, that wasn't their design, but you know, Return to Eden. There was a game called Return to Eden on the 8-bits by level 9, which was just really, really great. They did a lot of things: Red Moon, Dungeon Adventure, Worm in Paradise. I mean, Snowball. I mean, they were just. I mean, they were technically very, very clever, but creatively super clever as well. And there was like 2 or 3 of them. You know, I mean, it was. I still admire them hugely. So, in terms of adventures, that's where my interest came from. When Charles Cecil said to me, "Let's create Revolution," you know, he took us all away with a PC he'd borrowed from Activision, and we played Leisure Suit Larry. Mm-hmm. One of those ones. I don't remember which one. It was one of the very early ones, and we looked at that and we wondered what we could do to sort of match it or do something technically better. You know, so we looked at that on a PC. Probably King's Quest as well. And this was before LucasArts, so we didn't see any LucasArts games at that point. They were kind of starting off the same as we were. So that's really where, I mean, all of mine and probably most of Charles's influence came from 8-bit adventures, really. And it was like a new world when we started doing them on the PC. So we didn't have much reference, really. You know, a little bit of Sierra stuff, but not much more.
Yeah. So, which are principal difference between to prepare Amstrad CPC games and maybe an arcade platform games when you have to create your own engine to make the menu, the game interface for the Buenas Steel Sky? You create by yourself? Do you have a reference for the existing graphic adventures, or do you have clear what you want what you want to give us, the players, for interact with your game at the Buenas Steel Sky?
Well, yeah, as I say, we looked at the Sierra games and they were very simple point and clicks. You know, you would have and what we saw was that they had a single screen and you had hotspots to click on, and you clicked on a hotspot and something happened, and then you know you clicked on another one, and it was clearly quite simple. So, you know, our idea was with virtual theatre was to create a world that continued running all the time, and the people walked around off screen and on screen. And I guess some of the ideas for that came from the Gargoyle games on the 8-bit system. So if you remember Turnanog and Marsport and Dundurak, we were quite impressed by. I mean, they're still quite impressive feats of programming, really, and design. But I guess we were looking at those sorts of games on the 8-bits and kind of saying, can we move those ideas into the 16-bit world and kind of combine it with this gameplay that the Sierra games are using. So we kind of wanted to beat them technically and do something with gameplay that kind of, you know, you took a design from an older platform and kind of moved it into the modern world and used the extra processing and the better graphics and all the extra memory to do something more impressive, you know. So really, there was a kind of a feeling that you could do anything you wanted when we moved to 16-bit because there's so much more potential, you know. You know, we felt we had, you know, like infinite creativity at our fingertips, and we kind of went a bit crazy, you know, and that's where virtual theatre came from, which was it was quite a sophisticated engine, but there was no reference for anything like that. You know, we literally started programming it because there was nothing else like that. So we just had this idea of the people coming and going, and we didn't really design it, and we didn't really think it through, and there was no master plan apart from this vague idea that people would walk around the world, and we just started programming, to be honest, because that's how you did it. And in the 8-bit days, you just start programming, and you'd probably come up with something quite good, and you were limited in scope anyway. So you were never going to spend years and years and years writing an 8-bit game because you'd run out of memory. So you could only do so much. The beauty of that was the beauty of the 8-bits. Really, you were constrained. The constraint drove you to be creative, and that was good. The danger comes in games development when you don't have the constraints. That's why so many AAA games these days go horribly wrong, because there's effectively no constraints. You can just keep drawing graphics, and nothing will stop you. You'll not run out of memory. You'll not run out of storage. You can just keep going forever. So you run out of budget, you run out of time, and you've got 1,000 employees, and you're $500 million down. And you're never going to make the money back. That's the problem with the games industry at the moment. So the beauty, going back to it, was you were constrained, and that constraint was quite useful, and it drove you to be creative. Now, that obviously, when we started writing 16-bit games, Lure the Temptress and Steel Sky, we felt we were throwing away those constraints, but in truth, there was still quite a lot of constraint on an ST and an Amiga, because you had these floppy disks, and you were allowed to use a few of them. So that was the constraint. So you could do a lot more, but not too much more. If that makes any sense.
So we have a question from one of our sponsors. Do you have any crazy story about developing games in the 80s? Any crazy story about that craziness that we were talking before, Tony? Maybe a little tip?
The 8-bit days. Hard to say, really. It was just, it was like being in a. We thought we were like being in a band. We would do a lot of work, and we would go to the pub, and we would just do whatever we wanted, and drink tea all day, and work late into the night, and listen to loud music, and then later on we'd play Doom, until it was midnight, and then go to the pub. It was no one was telling us what to do. There was no management as such. It was just a bit wild. That's a good way to be creative.
Okay, Tony, do you expect the Buenas Steel Sky were so great game because for the very first time your own company bet for the very first game and graphic adventure, that wasn't a risk? Do you think at any time much better to create a very good arcade, ships, another shooting apps or something like that, or do you have clear that the graphic adventure will fit in the market at the time?
It was in the early 90s. It was a very good market. Sierra were doing extremely well, and Charles Cecil and Noreen Kamodi, they worked at Activision, and they had access to, because they were distributing Sierra games in Europe effectively through Activision. So they effectively had the sales figures and saw that those games were doing very well. And I liked adventure games from the 8-bits. Charles, of course, at Arctic wrote several adventure games, Adventure B, Adventure C, that kind of thing. So he'd made adventure games before, and his great joy was creating narrative, the idea of creating narrative games, and he wanted to, his ambition was to push that kind of side of the games industry a bit further, and it was, we felt it was a clever move, because everybody else was making arcade games, or this, that, and the other. More what you'd now consider to be more platform games and fighting games, and say arcade shooting ups and that kind of thing. Everybody else was doing that, so we felt we had a bit of an advantage being interested in adventure games and seeing that they were actually quite commercially successful. We felt we could go into that side and be a bit more unique than everyone else, and we saw that as an advantage. So that's the reason we did it. We saw it as safer rather than more risky.
So after the 16, the DOS era, Atari and Amiga and everything, the good consoles as PlayStation 1 come into the market. So you make a very good jump game. Before we enter in the Broken Sword world, when you have the tools or when you have the capabilities in order to create a PlayStation 1, Sony give you a development kit or something like that, or you have people that working in the way that Sony can give the coders and the graphic stuff to make their own games?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't just make a console game. That was the problem. You had to go to Sony and tell them what you were going to do, and ideally you would have a publisher and this kind of thing. But actually, our first PlayStation 1 game was Broken Sword, I think. So I think if I remember, Sony were actually the publisher. So it was very easy. You know, we went directly to Sony Europe in London and said we'd like to do Broken Sword on the PlayStation. What do you think? And they were like, they were sort of, yeah, okay, we'll give it, we'll try it. We don't think it'll cost very much to port the game, so we can't really go wrong, you know, as long as you can do it. So they would give us a development kit and access to technical information. I think we probably had 2 development kits, and they were normally, you know, $5,000 each or something. It was all very expensive. It was a different kind of world, to be honest. But you know, they were not particularly excited by Broken Sword, but they saw that it would be quite a cheap port, so they were like, yeah, we'll try it. You know, we don't think it's the right thing for the platform, but you can do it. You know, so it was quite easy because Sony were the publisher. So because you couldn't, you know, it wasn't like a Spectrum or an Amiga. You could just write any game you wanted and publish it. The consoles were controlled, so you had to go and beg Sony for permission to do it.
So because we are talking about the big jump between 8 and 16, but the PlayStation, you have literally no limits in that era, and more than 100 people working on the Broken Sword. you lead the system design. So what were your particular tasks and were the people you're working with to prepare the system design, Tony?
Well, we didn't take the PlayStation or ourselves very seriously. So, you know, we had the deal with Sony, and they had quite low expectations for sales. So we actually hired some people that we knew to come in and that had some experience with PlayStation. So we just grew the Broken Sword team a little bit, and 2 or 3 guys from a different company came, and we kind of hired them to do the whole. It wasn't really a port as such, because they were a lot of the time working directly with us, but you know, we extended our team with some experienced people on the PlayStation, and you know, we helped them do it, and they did the PlayStation-y bits, you know. So I never actually myself programmed the PlayStation 1, but I was sat next to the guys who were doing that particular version of it, you know.
So any kind of difference as a system designer to prepare the same versions for the PlayStation and the PC, Tony? Do you have any limitation? Because the PlayStation maybe in the era was powerful than the home computers at home. Maybe you have any kind of restrictions?
Yeah, I don't remember it being too difficult. I mean, there was the problem of how to do the control interface, which I don't think we handled particularly well. You know, we tried to do it with a, you know, you could play Broken Sword with a mouse, but of course not many people had a PlayStation mouse. Mm-hmm. We missed an opportunity to try and invent a console specific interface for adventure games, and we can't. What we ended up doing was quite a bad port, really, of the PC one in terms of UI. So that was our failing really as designers. But we weren't taking the PlayStation all that seriously, and we probably should have been, because it became much bigger than anyone thought it was going to be. And the interesting thing was, a Broken Sword actually sold like 10 times more copies than even Sony had predicted.
No.
So there was scope for spending a lot more time on it than we did. I mean, you're certainly right. The PlayStation 1 was actually down spec from the PCs we were used to. But on the other hand, the good thing about the PlayStation was it was back to being a fixed spec. So, because at the time we had a lot of problems with PCs, and you don't really think about this these days. But back in the 90s, when you wrote a PC game, it was you had to think, what's our lowest spec?
Yeah.
What's our middle spec? What's our top spec? And what can we do to, we had to predict what those specs would be in, like, if your game's coming out in 18 months time, you had to guess what PCs would be like in 18 months time. You'd have your 3 low, middle, high spec, hopefully guess it correctly. Then you'd have to kind of do something. You'd have to do something good for the people with high spec to keep them happy, to justify their expensive PCs. But you'd have to still support your best fans who perhaps had the worst PC in the world. So you had to write this game that worked on different spec machines, and that was actually really difficult. And probably one of the worst things about PC development in the 90s was having to constantly work with different hardware specifications and memory specifications, and how fast is the CD-ROM going to spin, and this kind of thing. It was a nightmare.
The CD-ROM capabilities, the RAM, the hard disk storage device memory. So many things in that era, 96, 97, increase on the PC computers, home computers, growing so fast. So maybe that is a problem for the studio. To have as soon as possible the Broken Sword out of the street selling, because if you have more time developing, it will take obsolete for the new home computers that people bring home.
Yeah, and you can spend too long on a game. I mean, it's still true today, to be honest, maybe for different reasons. A lot of these big companies are spending 5 years or more writing a video game, and it's not a good thing to do, to be honest, because things start to go wrong. You don't want to be that long. Ideally you want to be 18 months to write a game from start to finish, which is quite difficult. But Broken Sword was effectively 2 years. Surprisingly enough, given how large it is and how complex it is, we actually did that within 2 years, which seems astonishing now, because I think if that was a AAA PC game in development now, it would be 4 years, which is too long, because people, it's just too long to spend on a game. Things start to go wrong. You need to do the game, get it finished, learn from the mistakes, do another game. You're much better off writing 2 small games in 4 years than one game that's maybe bad in 4 years.
I got some people on the chat talking about the Broken Sword 1 or the Broken Sword 2 was easier to play on console, on PlayStation. So for you, the PlayStation, not everyone has the mouse in order to play better as the PC users on the consoles. How do you figure it out? How with the play control stick, can I get the same feelings, or can you make that easier, that the people in chat are talking about? I have to make it easier for the player to move around, to interact with things. Is that for you a problem all the time, thinking about how you made it?
I'm wondering why they think it was easier on the PlayStation. I'd be interested to know why was it easier on the PlayStation? Because the game was effectively the same. The puzzles were the same. The problem, it wasn't really cut back in any way. We maybe dropped a couple of background sprites on occasional locations. I think the pub in Ireland had slightly less sprites because we couldn't fit them all in the PlayStation's video RAM all at the same time or something. But the gameplay was the same. I mean, to my mind, the PlayStation version was harder to play, especially if you weren't using a mouse, because you had a really bad sort of move the cursor up and move the cursor across, and we emulated a mouse, but using the whatever it was called, the PSX controller. DualShock, was that called the DualShock, or did that come later?
Yeah, maybe I have one here.
The grey one.
This one, something like this is from the PC4, but something like that,
Yeah, well, it was before because the first PSX one didn't have the two. It didn't have the
two sticks like that.
Yeah, it just had the D-pad. So what we did was we moved the mouse up and down directly on the D-pad, which actually was quite difficult to play, not a very good solution. I think
people is happy with that solution. According to the people on the chat talking right now. After the Broken Sword, you move on to engine development for two Disney's products, Disney Activity Center, Pixar's Books Life, and animated storybook Mulan. Tony, any pressure from Disney directly about the control on what the game is going on and the final product, or do you have freedom to make a game according the specifics?
I think we didn't do much creatively with those projects. I think Disney were very much saying this is what we want, and we were just doing the work. For us, they weren't creative projects particularly. I think we worked very much to a spec. Mm-hmm. And we kind of ran them. We were effectively doing those projects to supplement the creative work we were doing. So the Broken Swords, whatever. We thought it would be a safe idea to have that kind of porting stuff going on alongside the creative games to kind of just do the cash flow really. Yeah. And some money. Of course, it never really works because you hire people to do the work, but then it takes longer. Of course, it takes longer than it's supposed to do. So it ends up not supporting the company really. More dragging it down because there's just more administration and more people, and more people and more computers to keep working and all the rest of it. I mean, they were nice little projects, but it probably didn't really work out for us in the way we expected it to.
So PC1, PC2, Windows, Nintendo DS. Which new platform, which new consoles, or which new specifics, maybe hardware, maybe software, all over the time give you more surprise in order to think, this is the future, and now I have it. Which platform or which jump? What's for you at present the most spectacular, the most significant on the industry, Tony?
Of all of them, I mean, I've got a soft spot for the GBA because the GBA Broken Sword was my project, and it was extremely difficult because it was constrained by an 8 meg cartridge, and the idea of putting Broken Sword into 8 megs was a big deal at the time. People didn't think we could do it, but we somehow managed to squeeze it in. It wasn't. It wasn't anything other than a sort of pleasing thing to work on. But it did kind of show. I got the idea that I quite liked mobile devices. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I always got along quite well with mobile platforms, and the GBA was the first one we did. I mean, we did the DS Broken Sword Director's Cut later on, which was kind of an extension of GBA Sword. And that was good. I mean, I quite liked doing the DS thing as well. I mean, the biggest thing we ever saw was the iPhone, mm-hmm. for sure, because no one really took mobile phones very seriously as platforms for games up until the iPhone. Some people were doing, remember WAP games and that kind of thing. It was all a bit rubbishy, and we couldn't really see a future in any of that really. But then when we had a meeting with Apple, and we started reading, I actually read some articles in a magazine about a guy who'd written tap thing. It was called, on the iPhone, and this guy had gone on a flight, and he'd seen like 20 people playing with iPhones on this flight, and he'd kind of realized that the iPhone was going to be the next big thing, because so many people on this flight were playing apps as the plane was flying, you know. And this was before apps were a thing, you know. People, you know, everyone now, if you sit on an airplane or if you go sit anywhere in public, everyone's scrolling apps and stuff, you know. It's just normal now.
Yeah.
But like when you first saw that, you know, this guy was on an airplane and he saw lots of people playing on iPhones, and he kind of realized that this was going to be the next huge thing, you know. And I kind of brought this article into Revolution and said, you know, the iPhone is going to be huge. We should be looking at it. And people were like, yeah, Apple, you know, they come and go, you know. You know, we had some little Macintoshes, but they didn't really come to anything in the end, and we never wrote. Or we did write Macintosh Broken Sword, but it didn't really sell anything, you know. So, you know, we liked Apple because we were all Steve Jobs fans as kind of nerds and read about him and stuff. But we didn't really believe Apple were necessarily going to be the next big thing. But then they rang us up and said, "Can we come and talk to you about Broken Sword for the iPhone?" And that was when it all started. And then you kind of got a sense that the iPhone was going to be huge, and of course it was huge, you know. And it was very good for Revolution for a number of years because you know, we kind of got back into, you know, we were nearly dead, and then the iPhone kind of saved us a little bit, got us back into writing games again. So yeah, I've got a soft spot for iPhone still. I still use an iPhone because I feel loyal to it, you know.
Yeah.
It was good for us. Great machine.
So after many Broken Sword series, the last one, I mean, the Broken Sword 5 Serpent Course, you were programming on the before games, but you make a story concept for the last one. How do you feel not touching any coder as a coder, just as a story concept? You feel comfortable with that new role, or you prefer to code the game?
Well, I was a coder just as normal, just my normal job on Broken Sword 5, but that's 10 years ago now. I didn't, and I left Revolution before they did Beyond the Steel Sky because I didn't think it was going to be a good thing to work on. I thought it was going to be too much stress on that project, and I probably was right about that. So that was probably the last thing. That was the last time I worked directly on a Revolution project. I was quite close to the development on the Reforged. I mean, I didn't work on it directly, but I kind of watched it all the way through, and I think they did a pretty good job on the Reforged. And maybe it will, you know, maybe it will. And one of the good things about that project is it's very good on the console controllers. So maybe they will do with Reforged what we didn't do with Broken Sword 1 on the PlayStation, which is to kind of create a new audience for adventures on consoles. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I mean, I suspect it will do so a little bit. It's difficult to know what to do with adventure games. It's always been a problem of what should the next adventure game be. You know, how could you do it? How can you drive the genre forward? You know, it's always been a problem. And probably Broken Sword Reforged is as good as a traditional adventure can be on a console. You know, whether millions of people will buy it, I don't know. Hopefully they will, and then we'll all get to make expensive adventure games again.
Tony, we are now on the screen having a look for the Revolution, your Kickstarter book, funded very quickly about the story of Revolution Software, the rise of the game industry, told by yourself, one of its original founders, more than 31,000 thousand pounds when you ask him for the 8,000. What do you feel when your new project on the Kickstarter, that book, was funded so quickly, Tony? Do you expect that answer from the community?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, you never really know with Kickstarter if it's going to work or not. But yeah, I was very happy with how it went. I mean, I think it was a book, and the idea of it was that it would show what was going on in the background with development, because development is, as I've said, difficult and messy and chaotic and crazy. And I think 25 years worth of experience at Revolution, there's a good few fun stories to tell. And I thought it'd be nice to do that and explain to people that were fans of the games exactly what was going on in the background. Because there's always speculation about why things are, and the reasons are usually a lot more complicated than people imagine. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to help people making games, learn a few things that might help them with their own game development. I mean, I think that's probably true. I think it would be, if I was going to start developing games now, I'd think it would be a good book to read, because you learn a lot of dark things that happen in the games industry behind the scenes, and there are plenty of them. Shocking things happen to us, to be honest, and there's a reason why developers often don't last very long. It's because they just get screwed over by publishers and finance people, and all sorts of things go wrong, So I thought it would be good to document those things and try and help people who are interested in development, and also to set the record straight as well. I mean, no one else had written a book about Revolution, and it's quite a good story. So if I wrote the book first, then I'll be setting out the truth as I saw it, So that was also part of my plan with that book, and also to inspire myself in a way, because I still love writing games, and I want to keep writing games for the next however long I can, really. So I thought it'd be fun to just remember what we did back in the 90s and the 80s, and how we did it, and why we did it, and what was going on in our heads when we were doing all that creative work, and maybe get inspired, ready for developing new games. Because I think now is an interesting time, because once again, we can be free of publisher influence and other malign forces that are always out there trying to destroy people's creative work. And you can now write any game you want on any platform you want. You can write a Spectrum game, you can write a Commodore 64 game, you can write an Amiga game, and you can do that by yourself or with an artist, and do it at home like people used to do, and have success with it, which is brilliant. Or you can write a $500 million PlayStation 5 game, tax exempt studio in Canada. You can be one person or 1,000 people. All of those things are viable and commercially viable if you write a good game. So going back over my history in the games industry, which starts in the 80s right through to the bigger companies and the bigger projects, I wanted to inspire myself in a way, and get ready for the next things I do, which will be smaller projects, because that's where the fun is, I think.
Which on the Kickstarter video, you and another guy throwing the floppies. One amazing thing I discovered on the Chema Retromaniac interview, that you have you keep a lot of stuff from that time. Your Amstrad CPC, many software, many floppies. Is that the usual from other guys from Revolution Software, that they keep those past things at home, or they go to the trash, all the stuff as well?
I think collecting things is something I do. I mean, I hoard things, so I do like to buy. I mean, I buy copies of my old games from the 80s if I see them on eBay. So I've got mountains of. I've got like probably 50 copies of Obsidian and 50 copies of Deathstalker. I just buy them. I mean, they're getting quite expensive now, so it's not as easy to buy them, but and harder to find. But yeah, I just like hoarding things. So I've kept all my old computers, and I still buy. I mean, I bought a Spectrum 128 few weeks ago, a really pristine one, a really good condition one, because I didn't have one, and it's the final Sinclair machine, the final true Sinclair machine. So I thought I wanted one of those for my collection, and looked around and found one eventually that was good.
And it's in good conditions, the stuff that you can find in UK, or is very expensive to find out for an older classic original Spectrum CPC, or we are talking about the people on the second marketplaces ask for a lot of money of them, because in Spanish is craziness, to find older stuff.
I think it's getting, suddenly the last year or two, it's got a lot more expensive. You used to see things really cheap and not buy them, and then you wish that you had bought them, because now it's all quite expensive. I mean, a machine, an 8-bit machine or an Amiga that's in really good condition is expensive to buy these days. But there are lots and lots that aren't in good condition, and I think there's quite a big hobby scene in restoring things as well. I mean, I got effectively given an Amiga 500 Plus a few weeks ago, which was broken. The battery had leaked and damaged the motherboard, and it didn't work. And it would have been thrown away, but I got someone to fix the board and replace the chips that had been damaged, and now that machine's come back to life. And that's a satisfying thing to do as well, because they don't make those machines anymore. So if you can restore one and bring it back to life, then that's a great thing as well. So yeah, to answer the question, you can spend a lot of money on a pristine computer in a box that's never been used in perfect condition, or you can buy a broken one and fix it, and the broken ones tend to be obviously a lot cheaper, but you can get a lot of parts. You can fix every single part of an Amiga these days. So I mean, it's not cheap to buy all those things, but it's a pretty good hobby.
So I having also looked for your itch.io site, when you have the next, we will talk later on about the URBX Warriors, but you also have Wormhole Dungeon, the book, Revolution, the Quest for Game Development Witness, and also you have to play in browsers, Slabadrom. I have one man at the chat that asking about if you are going, or do you have to plan to come back for the 8-bit Amstrad CPC in order to make new games for older computers. We're talking before starting the stream, and you say no. But apart from the book, when you have the need, or maybe make a decision to code your own games again, Tony? Back to the coding. I mean, back to the coding again to make that kind of games.
Yeah, well, it's just something that I want to do. I don't like working in big companies. I don't want to work with managers and be told what to do on other people's games. So the most fun I had was in small teams of people. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. They tend to be the most creative and move the fastest. That's where the real joy of game development is for me. And now, as I say, all of these platforms are viable again if you can write a good game. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to go back and work on these things. So Urbex is going to be a Spectrum Next game first. And it's quite complicated as to why we're doing Spectrum Next, but I'm quite good friends with Chris Wilkins of Retro Fusion Games, Fusion Retro Games, and he runs Crash Magazine now and Zap Magazine and all those things. I was at Crash Live this time last year, and there's another one in 2 weeks' time which I'll be at, and we did a talk on a panel, me and Charles, and we talked about the Spectrums, and there was huge enthusiasm for us and also for these machines that the hobbyists playing with Spectrum Next are so enthusiastic that it's a great place to be writing games again. I mean, it's a very small market on the Next, but it's a pretty cool place to be working. And we'll do a Spectrum Next version of our game first, And then we'll kind of go up the platforms, so we'll do an Amiga one after that, and it'll be a slightly bigger game. And the things that worked well on the first Spectrum version will improve, and the things that didn't work we'll probably get rid of and evolve the game for the Amiga. And then after the Amiga, we might then do a Steam version, or we might do a Dreamcast or something like that. So we can port this game to lots of different platforms, and there'll be quite a lot of fun to be had doing that. And I think maybe we'll kickstart each one of those so we can reach the audience. Sounds like a lot of fun to me. That's the kind of thing I want to do. It's back. It's going back to 80s development, but with the experience of all the years in between.
I have one fellow on chat that want to ask you about, aside from Umberto Eco, what authors or artists inspire you to create the Broken Sword saga, in case, Tony?
Well, it's right to say Umberto Eco was an influence on the writing for Broken Sword, because he was talking about Templars in one of his books. And that's where the Templar stuff came from. The art style came very much from the guys at Believe Studios, who we hired to do the lining for the background graphics. So there's a lot of Don Bluth in Broken Sword, and I guess the character animations came after that, so the characters fit the Don Bluth style of the backgrounds. We wanted to be kind of cartoony, but not too cartoony, but also not photorealistic either. So that's kind of where that style came from. It just kind of evolved, really. I don't remember anyone saying this is what we should do. It should be cartoony, but not too cartoony. It just we kind of met the people we wanted to work with, and that's what they were doing, and that's what they wanted to do. So it all kind of fell into place, basically. Lots of happy coincidences. Broken Sword, with the Barrington's music and Rolf Saxon's voice and Dave Cummins' text writing, dialogue writing, and the jokes and the humor from very much a Revolution thing. All of the components of Broken Sword just happened to happen from the people that were brought into the team.
Tony, we are taking a look to the Wormhole Dungeon, a project I think coming soon. It's an 8-bit style arcade adventure for the modern era. So we have the actual website, but we have plans, big plan for Dreamcast and Amiga EGA. Any reason to choose Dreamcast and Amiga EGA for this new development stuff, Tony? Any reason?
Well, Amiga is obviously a good place at the moment. There's there's huge enthusiasm for Amiga. It's quite a big scene, so I think it makes a lot of sense to support the Amiga. And I think actually we say AGA, but we'll actually do the chipset below that. Yeah. So we will actually be Amiga 500, Amiga 600 compatible as well. So we'll actually cover more than just AGA. Mm-hmm. So we'll go quite seriously for the Amiga. I think it'll be great fun to be back on that platform. Maybe Atari ST, but it's not. I think it's not as popular at the moment as it used to be.
Not so much. Still having a lot of enthusiasts and users for the moment. People are more focused on for the homebrew and the new productions is focused on 8 bits. As telling you before, we're starting. And if anyone choose 16 bits, mostly use for the Amiga AGA as well.
Yeah. In the future, looking beyond Urbex Warriors, it would be nice to do a true 8-bit game. It'd be nice to do an actual Spectrum 48, Spectrum 1 to 8 compatible game. I don't really have much of a design in my head, but I kind of have the idea that I'd like to do another Spectrum game. And then, if I did a Spectrum game, I could could do it for the Amstrad CPC as well. I mean, it would be great fun to go
we
back
have
to
too many Amstrad CPC on the audience. Yeah, for your information, they will lovely if you do that. But also, please go ahead. Excuse me.
No, it's on my list, the back of my head. Things I want to do. I'd love to do another CPC game because I think as I was saying, the constraints hold you back, and you can't go to you can't spend years and years on a CPC game. So I think it'd be fun to take everything I've learned and put it back into another CPC game.
Back to school.
Funnily enough, I mean, there was right at the end of our time on the 8-bit, I had a half-finished game on the Amstrad CPC. It was called Brute Force, and it was a bit like Ghosts and Goblins. It was half written. Now I had the Amstrad PC 1640 that was being developed on. That I had that machine, and I got it back recently, and the machine itself was dead, like really dead. So I pulled out the hard drive. Now I don't know if the hard drive works or not, but on the hard drive is the source code for Brute Force, which has now been sent to Spain, where some guys are going to try and get the disk working again. So it's possible in a couple of weeks' time I'll have that source code back. It's probably unlikely, but there's a chance that I'll get the source code to that game. So that could be something I could go back to. I mean, that was nearly finished, and that was an Amstrad CPC game first and foremost. So I could even finish that game. Who knows? But yeah, one way or another, it'd be great to go back to the CPC.
Yeah. I have another question for you for the wormhole dungeon on your website that you told absolutely guarantee no generative AI was used in the making of this game. Tony, any thoughts about the AI using for the coders, or did you see too many people using AI for making games quicker, cheaper, something like that, or do you want to keep clear to everyone? This is no AI game helping it anyway.
Well, I mean, I'm saying in any game I work on, there won't be any generative AI, and I'm saying that I strongly disapprove of that stuff. I mean, effectively, these AI models are just stealing other people's work and then recycling it around. I mean, if I steal the graphics from another game, then the people will see that I've stolen the graphics, and they'll be very unhappy, and I'll probably be in some kind of trouble for doing it. All of these generative AI models, they steal 2 or 3 people's work, mix it together so you can't tell whose it was, and then say, here you are, here's some new graphics, which is just the same thing. So I mean, there should be a huge class action lawsuit putting these people out of business for stealing people's work. I mean, I don't see any good that can come from it. I mean, if you need placeholder graphics for a game in development, then I suppose you could use generative AI to fill the spaces. But I mean, you really shouldn't be releasing games with that kind of artwork in them. A, because it's not your artwork ultimately, even though you can't tell exactly where it's been stolen from. But what are you saying about your own game if you're using zero worth artwork in it? Surely you're saying your game is also of zero worth. I think that the artwork in games is an important thing, and the people that create art for games should be paid for doing the work they do, and they should be able to do that for a living. It shouldn't be something that just gets stolen or is reduced to zero value as a kind of commodity without value, because it's not true that artwork does have value. So yeah, I'm very against this stuff used in commercial end products. I don't think they should be. I wrote in my blog recently that I was astonished to find that the Unreal, Epic Unreal, their fab.com store is actually selling this stuff, and they really shouldn't. They shouldn't be selling it at all.
We have the Kickstarter campaign for the URBX Warrior for Spectrum Next not starting yet, but on your Itch.io site we can see some screenshots. And for this game, the legendary pixel artist Stu Cambridge from Sensible Soccer and Canon Fodder is on your site for this game. I asked you before, but for our audience, why you choose, Tony, the Spectrum Next for that kind of new development we're talking about before, but yeah, for your audience, why you choose a Spectrum Next as a machine to prepare your next game as well?
I think because the user base for that machine is just so enthusiastic and also quite focused. It's very small, but enthusiastic, and I think if you produce a game for that machine, you can have a reasonable chance of reaching the core of that audience. They're not spread around the whole world in different places. They're pretty much focused, and you can find them in the Facebook groups and whatever. And we can take the game to Crash live show and meet the people that will be playing it. So it's just a good little platform to write the first game, basically. And also the machine itself is quite interesting, and it's quite sophisticated and powerful. So it lets us go back to the 8-bit, but also do a lot more than we could back in the day. So I mean, Urbex is a lot more sophisticated than you could do on a regular Spectrum. Even a 1 to 8K Spectrum couldn't come close to what this game does. It's more of an Amiga game, but on a Spectrum. So I mean, maybe we should have. I mean, our lives would probably be easier if we just started on the Amiga, because the Next is actually quite difficult to program. But and it would have been easier to just start on Amiga, but we started on the Next. So it's an interesting experience, and the game looks pretty great. So I'm sure it'll be good when it comes.
Do you have any prospects about when the Kickstarter campaign will go on, or in other words, the game and how is the currently the game status? Maybe more than 50%. Yeah, we have a few screenshots. The game is almost done. Tony?
It's probably 2/3 done. We did plan to kickstart it like 2 weeks ago, and being game development, everything kind of slipped a little bit, because it's actually a bigger project than we would probably like to admit that it is, because it was meant to be a very small project, and it's kind of grown into quite a big project for 2 people. So I guess we've slipped a little bit, and now we're if we started a Kickstarter now, we'd be finishing in December, and December is kind of Christmas, and people have got other things to do and other things to spend money on. So it's probably better for us now to wait until the new year. And it doesn't make any difference for the game, because we'll just keep writing it. So it'll come out at the same time regardless, and we'll have a much better demo to show on the Kickstarter anyway. So I mean, it's disappointing to miss this year, but it would have been nice to do the Kickstarter. But we'll delay it now and do it in the new year. It's just the way it's gone.
Any reason or thoughts in order to, as one of my audience men are talking about the gauntlet style, Tony?
The what story?
The new game, is any reason to prepare for the Spectrum Next a gauntlet style game, as we can see on the screenshots?
I mean, it does look gauntletty, but it's not really. It's more of an arcade adventure. So it's more, there's a lot of shooting and stuff in it, but there's a lot of puzzling as well. And so it's more of what we used to call arcade adventure in the 8-bit days.
Not 100% arcade. You bring us many more.
No, it's not 100% arcade. I mean, we like the idea of arcade in that it's simple to get into. So we wanted to take certain principles from arcade games, in that people would put 20 pence in, or €1 in or whatever it is, and they would start playing the game, and they had to understand how to play the game like really quickly. So we wanted to be the opposite of modern AAA video games, in that you don't have to read a manual or watch a tutorial on YouTube before you can play the game, So it'll be an easy game to get into. So in that sense, it will be like Gauntlet, but it's actually got more, it's got more puzzly things to do, and it's more sophisticated than Gauntlet. So it looks a bit Gauntlet-y, but it's not Gauntlet-y really.
The target will be, according to the site, Spectrum Next and maybe, or just in case you reach full Kickstarter campaign for the Amiga, Dreamcast, Mega Drive, and Steam versions.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, Amiga is a definite. I've got my Amigas going. I'm relearning the Amiga, which I can't remember anything about how we programmed it before. So I'm effectively relearning the Amiga at the moment. So we'll definitely do Amiga. We'll definitely do a much bigger, more graphically serious Steam version because it would make sense to do that at the end. It would be fun to do Dreamcast. I mean, it's very easy to do Dreamcast, and I think the market is quite vibrant. I hear good things about Dreamcast.
Mega Drive works well for the new stuff.
Mega Drive is also quite interesting, yeah, and the cartridges are quite easy to produce. So I don't know anything about the technical side of it at all. It might be difficult, or it might be easy. I need to look at the Mega Drive. I mean, if it's not too difficult to develop for, then we could definitely do a Mega Drive version. Because again, I've been following a few Kickstarters for Mega Drive games, and they've done very well. So there's obviously enthusiasm for the Mega Drive. It'd be nice to do that as well. I mean, I quite like the idea of spending a reasonable amount of time developing a game and then making it worthwhile by porting it to different platforms. And it's not a bad strategy, I think, for surviving as a small development team. Maybe we'll do a Switch. Maybe we'll even do
Switch also for that kind of game. Switch fits perfectly, Tony.
Switch, yeah,
absolutely.
Switch would be good.
Tony, also,
we might need a publisher. I think we might need a publisher for Switch, but just to deal with Nintendo and
if maybe we'll Steam must be working on Switch as well, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, the game itself would be great on Switch. No problem at all. It would be easy to do, and it would look great. So, be nice to do Switch. Yeah.
Tony, do you have a look previously or during the development on the new Spectrum next game, URBX Warriors, have a look to other games for this platform from the Spectrum Next in order to see what other people are making, styles, qualities, something like that, in order to have an idea the potential of the Next?
Yeah, I mean, I have a Next, so I mean, I bought a few games when it came out, and I'm kind of friends with Michael Flashware, who did Head Over Heels and Warhawk. I talked to him quite a lot, and he helped me get started on the development as well on the Next, very kindly. He's a very clever guy. So I looked at his games, and you can kind of see what kind of power it's got. Yeah, I just looking at Crash Live last year, we had a pretty good idea of what the machine could do, and then we thought, what could we do to use as much of it as possible? And I have to say, I was talking to you earlier, it is a difficult machine to program, because it's got, it's like what's a good analogy? It's like a very small car. It's like a Fiat 500 or something that's got turbochargers and all sorts of extra bits, customized. It's got lots and lots of extra hardware bolted onto the side of it to make it go faster. But consequently, it's quite difficult to deal with. I mean, there's lots of hardware tricks you can use, and everything's hardware, but you've got this 16-bit address bus still, and it's got lots of memory, but it's all bank switched, and bank switching is like it's really quite difficult to deal with. It would be much nicer just to use a huge, if it was 1 megabyte of flat memory, that would be a joy. But when it's like through little 16 or little 8K pages of memory, 8K, and you have to swap them in. It's kind of quite difficult work, really. It's just another layer of difficulty on top of everything else. So it's not easy writing Spectrum Next game. I'll say that. It's fun, but it's not easy. Yeah.
So now for the moment, discovering new tricks for the next, Tony, new tricks every day.
Just dealing with the easy stuff really has been enough. I mean, the main problem I had with this game is that we very quickly started running out of graphic frames in the sprite system, so we had to write a sprite design caching thing. So basically, each time a particular graphic frame is drawn on screen, it gets put to the top of a list, and then if a new frame, once all the frames have been used, which is actually quite quick, if you've got different bad guys and bullets and player and picking up weapons and the graphics, you very rapidly are using a lot more than 128 frames. So it has to age out the oldest ones. So if a new frame is drawing, it gets placed in the position where the oldest one to ever be drawn goes. And that just, it means the game can carry on as if there wasn't restrictions, and hopefully you don't see any problems where it's trying to use too many at once. But it was a very difficult system to write. And I actually got the idea from how to do it from Mike Daly, who is a genius programmer who you might know. He wrote the first version of Grand Theft Auto and also Lemmings. So super clever guy. Yeah. And he told me this idea for writing a sprite cacher. So that was something I did. But yeah, it was quite a difficult thing to do. I'll probably make it open source actually, because just so no one else has to write one. Because it was difficult.
Same thoughts from Stu, your fellow in this project, making the graphics and the Spectrum Next new capabilities after Stu play in many 16 small, little, tiny graphics. So is he the same thoughts as you when developing graphics or pixel for the Spectrum Next, your both new game?
Stu is like me, really. I mean, he's someone from the 90s who people know from the 90s, really. I mean, he's cannon fodder is to him what Broken Sword is to me. And we got talking at Crash last year, and we realized we were kind of similarly aligned on lots of issues. I mean, he wants to write games in a small team. I want to write games in a small team. He's great at pixel art. I can program the chips, so why not get together, and it's worked very well so far. I mean, it's great working with Stu. Hopefully he likes working with me. We both bring out the best in the other one. So, he'll push my code and I'll push his graphics and as you would hope from a small team, everyone produces slightly more than they would on their own. So, that's the beauty of it. That's why small teams are good. And it's been great, yeah. But if anybody, I guess not many people will be going over, but we'll be at Crash Live in a couple of weeks, and we'll have a demo of the game running, hopefully on a real Next. So we should get to show the game to a few real players, which will be great fun.
So maybe it would be nice if you can put me in contact with Stu also for bringing him here to my program one day. Yeah? For me, would be nice.
I'm sure he'd love to, yeah.
Okay, Tony, so 1 hour and a half stealing you before, for me was a very good pleasure. You have a trajectory, you have a story to keep all day talking with you about many specific things, but I suppose, and I think for the very first time, hope not the last, you come to my channel, we talk a general view about your programming and all your games mostly. So before we leave, if you have anything to tell for the people starting with matching code or starting with assembly, or in general young or not so young people that want to start making their own games, do you have any advice? Please feel free to give them.
That's a big question.
I know, not the last.
How to start writing games? If you're starting from nothing at all, from absolute beginning, I would look at a system, a little virtual console called Pico 8, which I'm sure you've heard of.
I know Pico 8. Yeah.
Very, very nice little thing. I would play with Pico 8, and I'd try and write something really simple like Centipede or Pac-Man or something like that on Pico 8. And if you can do that, then you can probably go from there onto. And what's more, write a game on Pico 8 and publish it. So you do the whole thing. You make the game, you install the software, you make the game, and then you publish it on itch or something. Yeah, and you've got, no matter how good it is or how bad it is, but you've been through the whole process. Okay, you started from nothing, you've made your game, you published it, people are playing it. Now you're ready to do something bigger. And after that, you should probably learn assembly language, because I mean, obviously in the modern world, people don't. They learn C# and they learn Unity. No. I don't like that kind of thing all that much. I know Unity quite well, but I don't like it very much. I would learn assembly code after that and write an Amiga game probably, or a Spectrum Next game, or even a Spectrum or a Commodore game, whichever system you like the most. Try and write a game from start to finish on one of those platforms and see where it takes you. And I think if you can do that, if you can write the Pico game, if you can write the Spectrum game and publish them, then you probably got what it takes to be a game programmer, game designer, game artist, and do it with two people or three people as well, because that really helps a lot. Form a small team. It's like being in a band. Pretend you're in a band, but you're not musical, so you're going to make video games instead. Do that, get the games out, and if they're good, then you probably got a good chance for a career making games. Especially now, as we said, you can be any position within the industry. You're not forced to go and work for Ubisoft. You can be your own team with your own name, doing your own games on your own terms. You can do whatever you want. And that's the beauty of it.
Okay, so that's all for this time. Tony, I want to thank you very much. You joined us in this good interview. I want to talk about the good chat, not so interview. We are talking about many things. So for me, it's a pleasure and honor. Hope you next time. Keep me informed, or I like keep informed watching the Kickstarter project to that next Spectrum Next game as soon as we can. And we will keep in touch. Okay, Tony, thank you very much.
Of course, and let's do it again sometime.
So, for everyone, now, excuse me, Tony in Spanish. Muchas gracias a los que habéis venido. Espero que hayáis disfrutado de la entrevista. Ha sido 1h30, no podíamos estar más tiempo justo, así que les veo mañana en español. Y como digo siempre, jugad mucho, pasadlo bien, jugad mucho y saludos. Lo iba a decir en inglés. Bye. Thank you, Tony. Bye.
Cheers.
Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling, tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Mercy. And maybe I seem a bit confused. Yeah, maybe, but I got you pegged. But I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Scrambled eggs all over my face. What is a boy to do?